Welcome to On the Beat, where we bring you a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter every week, exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network.
Well, what is going on, everybody? Welcome everybody into this episode of On the Beat, brought to you exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by Believe, a show where we bring you a different interview with a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter every single week to talk about the topics swirling around our Buffalo Bills, especially on this Victory Tuesday. My name is Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired. Please do us a favor. Please like. Please subscribe, whatever platform you are consuming this vidcast or podcast on. Do us that favor. Please like, please subscribe. And right now, we're just going to get right into this thing because he has had a whirlwind of about 24, actually a little more than 24 hours. Old friend of the show joins us today from Syracuse.com, the Buffalo Shout podcast, Buffalo Bills beat reporter Matt Parrino. Matt, I hear you're currently running on fumes. Confirm or deny?
Yeah, I'm looking for a gas station. Luckily, I got GPS, so you just hit that one button that says find the closest gas station. I'm hoping to find one. But it's been tough. Like, great weekend with my wife in New York City. And then obviously yesterday covering the game in New Jersey. And then getting back today and the Amari Cooper.
Well, was it the game, the flight, the game, the postgame, the flight, Amari Cooper, what also the announcement that the Bills are that there's a group out there that's looking to buy 25% stake in the Bills.
Yeah.
Like and the Devontae Adams. Like, there's been a lot for you, right?
It's a lot. It's a lot going on, but this is exciting. Like, I get that, when there's breaking news like this and you kind of get your ideas around it. And we did the emergency pod. I love this part of it. It makes for an interesting week. Because coming off of this, like, you're sitting up basically like 3 games in the division because you hold that tiebreaker now over the Jets and the Dolphins. And then you got the Titans coming up, who have kind of been one of the lower end teams in the league this year. Like, there's not a lot of, juice to this week coming off of a win like that. And I feel like this just completely, juices up the week. So that's cool from my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about Amari Cooper real quick. What insight can you give us as far as the listeners to our stuff, as far as kind of what happened, how this whole thing came together for the Buffalo Bills? Because it seems like it happened quick, and I've got some follow-up. So, yeah. So what can you tell us?
So, I mean, based on, what we've kind of tracked reports-wise, the Bills always kind of keep it close to the vest. This has been something that they've been kind of poking around at for over a month. I mean, the Devontae Adams smoke started shortly after the season began. And I think, like, even the Bills brass kind of knew that despite the really good start, a lot of good things happened in those games. So I think planning for the future, the way they constructed the offense was, all right, we want to see what this looks like, positioning Kincaid the way that they positioned him, seeing what Keon Coleman gives them early in the season. Khalil Shakir, obviously, he's lived up to the expectation there, but he's been banged up. And I don't know if anybody's really stood out as that week in and week out ascending player. I mean, Kincaid at times, I've heard Bills fans talking about asking the question already, is he a bust? Because it hasn't been the level of production that I think a lot of people thought when they traded up for him in the first round. I think some of it's fair. I think some of it is a product of the model. Like, when you go to Everyone Eats, right? Like, everyone kind of has to eat, or most people have to eat. And it's hard. There's a really good skit that Chris Rock used to do when he comes home and his mom dad would be at work all day, and she'd be getting dinner ready, and she'd put all the chicken on the table, and she'd start passing out the chicken. And one of the kids would try to take the big piece of chicken. She's like, that's daddy's piece of chicken. You do not eat the big piece of chicken. Right now, there is nobody eating the big piece of chicken in this offense. I think like they needed to find somebody that at times could eat that way. And, Dalton Kincaid is still developing into what I think he's going to be in this league. Sometimes it takes a little longer. We talked about this when they drafted him. The tight end position is one of the toughest to project into the league because there's so much that has to go right. Even Sam Laporta, who took the league by storm in year 1, he's kind of, I don't want to say regressed, but you've started to see like the pendulum shift a little bit. You've seen Jamison Williams start to rise in that offense.
Yep.
Amon-Ra St. Brown is a big piece of that offense. So it fluctuates a little bit. And I think what Cooper does, it lets everybody else in the offense settle into their role a little bit more clearly. Khalil Shakir could be that high end 2. Curtis Samuel can be that 3-4, depending on the week. Keon Coleman the pressure can come off of him. There might be some games where he does eat at a larger level, and some games where he can kind of sit back, watch a vet like Amari Cooper, and hopefully some of that impacts him.
Yeah, the everybody eats mantra, tagline, whatever you want to call it, it sounds great. It's funny because it feels like to me, everybody eats. When it started out, it was wide receiver by committee. Everybody eats, and they were like the same thing. And now it's very much a difference because when I think of everybody eats, I think of the Lions. You went to the perfect kind of scenario for everybody eats. And the hard part about it is all the guys you mentioned are superstars, if not borderline superstars for the Lions. And it feels like the Bills realize that we're doing wide receiver by committee, which means we don't really have that guy that has earned, as Daniel Gowers in the chat says, that big piece of chicken. By the way, that happens at my house too. My wife pulls out the tray and she's like, that's Dad's. So I totally track with that 100%. I think what's interesting to me is was there something, do you feel like this was an early thing? Do you feel like that the Bills were preparing the Mafia for if they didn't land a guy through the season, like when they were saying, no, this is, we're gonna dance with the one we brought. Meanwhile, this was in the works, or do you feel like there was a moment where it's like, yeah, this, like, guys aren't able to get open, we're gonna have to do something different that kind of triggered this whole thing, this movement over the last couple of weeks?
I truly think they didn't know what it was going to look like. Like, I think that you could project it and you could say, we want this to be, Dalton Kincaid's offense, but for whatever reason, like, he hasn't been able to. And also it's a challenge because the dynamic is funny there to begin with. Not a lot of rookie tight ends that are drafted in the first round are coming into a situation where the guy that's now their immediate backup is making like $10 million more per season than them. It's like a strange like dynamic, not to mention his familiarity with Josh Allen, his friendship with Josh Allen, his standing in this offense. He's always kind of been that, third or fourth option, which has been good for Dawson Knox, but it's kind of pushed him down even further since Kincaid has been here and tried to make him this part of it. But I think that when we got into the season, it always felt like this move was going to happen. And I always felt like this made so much more sense than an Adams move, where I still think they're going to have to figure out what that thing looks like long term. Of course, he can go to free agency. Like, if this Jets thing blows up and Aaron Rodgers is like, all right, I'm out, Devontae's going to be a free agent, he can follow me to the next stop, wherever that ends up being. And,
the Vikings, right? Naturally, it's got to be the Vikings.
Yeah, take the circus on the road to the next stop. But, I think Cooper, there's so much like buried in his 2023 tape and stats that make it worth the small gamble. Like, a lot of people are making a lot of the drops, right? Well, drops happen when you're playing with the worst quarterback in the NFL right now. Deshaun Watson has been terrible. I've watched a lot of Browns games. There's some stats like the off-target throws that Amari Cooper is seeing in that offense. It's like nothing anybody else is experiencing outside a small group of receivers in the league. He's going with one of the most off-target throwers in the league to Josh Allen, who's the second most on-target thrower in the league. Can you imagine what that's going to do for Amari Cooper? I love the move. It costs next to nothing. It's a third-round pick. And listen, for every Terrell Bernard, that has been this massive hit, there's a Dawson Knox and Devin Singletary who year after year, you're like, all right, it's a hit very, very sometimes, but a lot of other times it's not.
Yeah, can we get there already? What you've been around the players for a long time, just around NFL players, and it feels like, the Browns go out, they get Jerry Jeudy, and then they're immediately in on like all of these talks around Brandon Ayuk, and there's speculation that Amari Cooper, the way that he's been playing, and the reason is because he's a little upset, or his feelings are a little hurt, and as much as these guys are professionals, I guess that's the question. Is it possible that fed into a little deconstruction of his ego and just maybe made him somewhat very similar to what Diggs did? Diggs got a little bit disinterested in being in Buffalo, and we saw it in his play. I mean, it's something to be said for, hey, you're our guy until you're not. And guess what? You're not. We're going to do everything we can to replace you and get you out of here as fast as we possibly can.
I think there's a lot to being in a situation where there's no path to success as a team, as an
Right.
offense. Like you can't lie to elite level players in this league at any position that have been around the game as much as Amari Cooper has, and like try to lie to yourself and say that you're going to be competitive. There's all the team stuff, the rah-rah, the buy-in, all that stuff. You can do all of that. But when you really bring it all down to it, you know if you're going to be a competitive team or not. And I think if you go back to training camp and some of the stuff coming out of the Browns, camp and preseason, this was all written on the wall. So as much as like that Brandon Ayuk stuff probably impacted the way he felt, I think it also was just a factor of this isn't a very good team. He's forced to play with a bad quarterback who's making gobs and gobs of money, taking up all of the money. And, he's not necessarily, not poorly compensated, but it's not great. Look at his career though, dude. Oakland for 4.5 seasons, gets traded to Dallas. Plays with Dak Prescott, has some minimal success there, but Dak Prescott, how many playoff games has he won? 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Then he goes to Cleveland, has his brightest moment on a crazy fluke run with Joe Flacco last year. Like, this is a guy that's been in the league for a decade and has had no real consistent success or been in a situation where it was a legitimate place to go try to win a Super Bowl. And I'm throwing Dallas in there. I've never thought that they were a serious Super Bowl contender. Now he's with Josh Allen. Now he's with a team that defensively, for as much as I think we could talk in circles around Sean McDermott, and it's a conversation that will never stop because, it's what keeps it moving. I think you're Amari Cooper. You're approaching this twofold. Number one, it's a legitimate chance to make the playoffs and go on a run in the playoffs. That's number one. The number two thing is you're 30 years old. You're likely going to you might not get one more really big multi-year deal at 31 years old, but you could land that DeAndre Hopkins special, like a 2-year, $45 million deal if you go ball out over the course of the season. So that's what you're pitching. If you're Brandon Beane, there's the familiarity with Adam Henry in this offense already, and Joe Brady and Sean McDermott were talking about that earlier today. I think you just kind of throw all of this into the pot and see if you can't make a pretty sweet stew.
Yeah, I've got that's actually really well said. I've got a couple other questions about Amari Cooper as well. Talking with Matt Parrino from Syracuse.com and the Buffalo Shout podcast. Not that there's any easy games in the NFL. Like, clearly the last thing we ever want to get caught saying, especially myself on a network with two former NFL football players, there's no such thing as an easy game. But the Titans are coming into Buffalo this weekend for the next game for Week 7. It felt like I've heard the Bills have brought players in before, and it just felt like the language and the energy, and maybe they're tired around the Amari signing trade was a little different, almost like they were trying not to like bring a level of excitement. Does it make sense to maybe keep him out a week and let him, get assimilated to the culture, the playbook, the team, the organization? Or is this no, like he's playing this Sunday?
No, I think they're going to try to get him out there and get him working with Josh. I think that, he's played for the last couple of weeks and of the season. And now you're in a spot where you kind of come in here, you probably put him on a diet. Like what's he been playing there? Maybe 60 to 80% of the snaps. Yeah. Maybe you put him in the MVS role for week 1, where you're just getting kind of like a 20% of the snaps. And Joe Brady talked about it today. You just put him out there in the stuff that he knows that he can do well. That's like similar to what they ran in Cleveland, which is a little bit different. Like that's another thing that Joe Brady has said. So I don't think the expectations should be crazy. And I think that they still have their core 4 guys of, get Mac Hollins in his role for 1 or 2 more weeks while that kind of transition is happening. And to your point, I don't necessarily think they're going to be in a shootout against the Titans, but you're right. Yeah. You're definitely not looking over it. I think you lean on the run game. You hope you get James Cook back and he's in a good spot. I mean, it seemed like he was close to playing and they just, peeled him off at the last second. So he should be good to go. And I think that gives you enough. And Khalil Shakir, he played, he's going to only be healthier. So I think they're in a pretty good spot. And you just kind of like sprinkle Cooper in, I think, in week 1.
Agreed. You brought up McDermott, so we're going to talk about it. That's not why we're going to talk about it, because we have to. You said it, like we're going to have to talk about it. In regards to Amari Cooper, I found his responses just a little flat. He seemed to just have a lack of words in regards to the trade and what he felt about it. His first response was, "We trust the guys we have here," to which I'm like, clearly you don't. Otherwise you wouldn't be looking to make a trade, or at least Brandon Beane wouldn't be looking to make a trade. But even in his responses, I didn't glean a huge sense of elation at the acquisition. It was very much I don't really know this guy. I don't know about his leadership abilities. We're going to get him in here, find out what he can do. We'll see what happens. It was just, I don't know. It was a strange, maybe he's tired. It was just strange to me. I don't know how you felt.
It was strange. And I followed up at the end with, all right, so I've covered you for many years.
Yes, you did.
I know you like to really emphasize the team and like everything that goes into like the group and the collective. I get all that.
Yep.
But I kind of wanted to insinuate, like, you don't trade for Amari Cooper if you're okay with the guys and you believe in the guys and everything's okay. And oh, by the way, you turn around and cut Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who you gave $2.5 million guaranteed money to. Like, all of this is in play. And I think it was to say it's what Sean does. It's like his status quo. Like, he's never going to place expectations on a player from Josh to Frank Gore Jr. He's not going to do it. Like, you could try to like pester him into it or, ask in different ways. He's just not going to do it. So what he wants to do is set the bar really low from the beginning, because then he knows he can build all of these little victories along the way, because they're going to be clearing the bar. He has an okay game where he catches a couple balls, but like it goes for 70 yards, and the Bills haven't had a 70-yard receiver since week 3 or 2. And now you're saying, okay, there's progress, but there's still more meat on the bone. And now you've created that whole culture angle where you're bringing Amari Cooper into that. That's just what he's going to do. So you caught up on that. I was trying to like kind of peck away at it a little bit, but he usually doesn't bite.
You were fishing a little bit in these interviews today. I was actually very appreciative. It was funny. I texted you earlier because you texted me and literally as you texted me, you popped in and started asking questions. And I was like, that's super bizarre. So I was locked into what you were asking anyway, but it happened twice in my opinion. You also asked him about Tyler Bass today. Do you feel that the answer you got from him was what you were looking for? Because to me, historically speaking, when you're talking about kickers, when they fall off the edge, they live on the edge of a knife. And when they fall off the edge, rarely do they find their way back as far as that goes. And I'm just curious what you thought about his response to you as it pertained to that question about Tyler.
Well, I think the Bills are probably sitting staring at that $7 million debt cap hit. And every time they're answering a question about Tyler Bass, that figure flashes in their brain. So I think that's a piece of it. We'll get Brandon Beane tomorrow after or it's a walkthrough tomorrow. He'll talk about the Amari Cooper deal. So maybe like a little bit of a check-in with him on Bass. But I've maintained so Brandon McManus, I guess, is a guy out there. He worked out for the Green Bay Packers. That would be an intriguing move just from the perspective as he's been a really successful kicker in the league, getting in a veteran like that. And I think the practice squad route at the very least, you don't have to move on from Bass, but you could challenge him a little bit. And if he isn't up for the challenge, then ultimately move on, whether it's this season. Like, I don't think you can go into the playoffs with a confidence depleted Tyler Bass as your only option as a kicker. So I think that these misses they're adding up, right? And the more that he kind of throws in that bucket, the heavier the pendulum is starting to shift. And I think that right now it's kind of easy to stick with them because it's the regular season, and most of these games they're pretty good in 1-score games when they're not giving up 52-yard Hail Mary touchdowns. Like, they're pretty solid in these games. So I think that they're in a good spot, and I think they want to give them a little runway here before the Kansas City game, and that stretch potentially could be the one that really. But by then, if McManus is signed and your options are limited, the more you wait on this, the more it becomes an issue. So I think it's definitely touch and go. It's a guy you invested in. He's a draft pick. You drafted a kicker, which is always its own little side conversation. But it is what it is. And you see around the league, even Justin Tucker. I think I saw a stat today that he's connected on 77% of kicks. One of the most reliable guys in NFL history. It's a funny business.
Yeah. Yeah, the once they fall off the edge. And it's funny, you led me right down to the next one, which was, the question that I had, and it feels like you already have said yes, that, I was going to ask, are they trapped, like cap and availability? So it's not only the fact that, like, it's what they're paying him along with who's out there and who's available. It's almost like they're managing the situation than they are, or correction. They're not managing the player and trying to necessarily correct. They're just stuck. There's not a whole lot that they can do. You also talked about the Hail Mary.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So Sean McDermott. So I do a show now the day after games called The Aftermath, which is it's an old school Joe solo show. And I talked about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about even still. And it was great of Brandon Bean to make a trade for Amari Cooper and make my entire show obsolete 2 hours after I did that show. It's funny how that happens, right? I don't do emergency pods like you and Ryan do, so I don't stay on the cusp. But they said that they were guarding the sidelines. That's what Sean McDermott came off. And it was clear that they were. They rushed to whatever. Steve Tasker on One Bills Live today lost his ever-loving mind just about knocking it down, which is where I was with the whole thing. It's like, you just knock it down. But it's clear to me, and it seems like it is to everybody, that the in-game and late-game gaffes are just wearing thin with the fans. When that happened, there was a wave of conversation on Twitter from Bills Mafia that was effectively, oh, I know what we're going to get in post-game. This is a mistake, and we've got to learn from our mistakes. And it's that coach speak. We've got to learn from this. Where is the accountability, and when does it finally come where it's like, okay, you haven't learned? I mean, you can go through the late game gaffes, the late half gaffes, just the mistakes that, situationally speaking, he's a great coach. And that's what I said today. But situationally, he struggles a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like he's looking in the mirror when he's talking to us, talking about the importance of situational football. Like he's almost like talking to himself and like reminding himself, like, you've got to get better in this spot. But you're right. Like, this is year 8. Those kinds of things can happen. And shout out to Ralph Wilson Sr., regular in the YouTube chat. I will turn the hat around. We're up 3-0 right now in game 2. Why not? Let's put it on there. I got yelled at earlier for wearing it because Josh Reed, my buddy over at Channel 4, is a big Guards fan. Sorry about that, Cleveland fans, but love Ralph Wilson Sr. He's always in the comments over on Shaw. We appreciate you, man. Love the cross show love. But yeah, it's a Sean McDermott thing. Did you watch the Bill Belichick clip from the Peyton Manning show?
I've gotten through the first half, so I don't know where you were at. So actually I didn't get to the Hail Mary. I got through the first half up to about 5 minutes.
There's a clip, they put it out on ESPN, where Belichick's watching the play. Sean McDermott calls a timeout, and he literally takes you through everything he'd be thinking as the defensive play caller. And he actually said, all right, they're going to do 2 things here. They're either going to work the sideline, which you have to protect against, but you also have to have the personnel out there to check at the line of scrimmage to play the Hail Mary if they go down the field. Now, I think during the call, he kind of like got to the point where it's like, okay, it's Aaron Rodgers. We know his history. You know who he is and what he's going to try to do. He's going to try to throw it down the field. So you got to know that you're going to protect about that.
You were in the press box, and all of you knew what was about to happen. 100%. All of you knew. Everybody
100%.
knew.
Yeah. And like, I know Taryn is taught to do that, and I'm not a football coach. Like, Taryn was like, that's what you do. My responsibility was to try to box him out. But I play a lot of basketball. And if you're going to try to box somebody out, right, and you don't hit on it, you are not getting that rebound. And so once you don't feel like you're in a position to get your body on the receiver, you almost have to, like, at that point, just interfere with them, tackle them, do whatever you have to do, because at least then it gives them first and goal at the 1, gives you a chance to prevent the touchdown from that perspective. Just the whole way of, you have a timeout, the lack of awareness and preparedness in that spot with the history for this coach and this team, it always is going to bring up all of those warts from years past, and it's going to get all of the Fire McDermott crowd riled up, because it was in my mentions all throughout halftime.
Oh yeah, it's Steve Tasker said that if you can't get to the football to catch it, which you should never be trying to do, he said you should literally break 9 arms if you have to keep the ball from being caught. Like Steve was, it was a fun moment. Steve Tasker in the open of
well, maybe I'll ask Sean about that tomorrow. I'll be like, well, your should-be Hall of Fame special teamer was on the radio yesterday imploring you to get your guys to do something to make sure that doesn't happen again, what's your response to that? Because,
Yeah.
that's the thing that sometimes I think coaches in general, like we have such the dynamic, this is on the beat. So a little inside, NFL journalism here. That relationship almost feels like it becomes on the coach's side, like it's me, Sean McDermott,
Mm,
talking to you, reporter Matt Parrino. But
mm,
I'm just like a conduit. I am there as a conveyor of information. I am sending whatever you say to the masses, to the
right.
Bill
Right.
to Bills fans. You're not talking, you're not answering to me. I'm
Right.
irrelevant in this equation. You're answering to the hundreds and thousands and millions of Bills fans that, are the same people that you're exalting for their support on game days and traveling to road games. All the time and energy they put in this team, they want answers. They want
Yeah.
to know that it's more than just I'm going to be better next time, and that you have the respect. And maybe that's a way that I should put it. Probably not in a press conference setting, because sometimes I
No.
don't like that. I don't like the confrontational, I got you on the camera, and that is for me. That is trying to put me, and that's not what I'm about. What
Right.
I'd much rather do is kind of have that conversation with Sean, and I think that he would be actually really interested in having it. So maybe that'll be something that I put in my notebook for the season.
Awesome.
I'll
I'd
get
love.
back
I'd
to you
love.
on the
Yeah.
next episode on the beat.
I'd love it. We do have a super chat. Before we get to the super chat, real quick, and we're talking with Matt Parrino from the Buffalo Shell podcast, Syracuse.com. On my show today, I talked about the fact that NFL teams and staffs and organizations are very good about having a staff member for incredibly strange, odd, sometimes very pointed and interesting things, like a passing coordinator. And I made the comment when they were talking about Doug Peterson getting fired on Sunday because, the best post-game press conference comment ever. We have a culture problem and it needs to be fixed. And it's just like, hey, bud, that's you're talking about. But like the Bills bringing in Doug Peterson as like a passing game coordinator, an assistant head coach, because obviously that's probably an area that we struggle in a little bit and have since Brian Daboll left, is just as far as scheming guys open, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, I was talking today to myself on my show, like a game situation advisor, like a guy that's up in the booth, like John Perry, who's calling. They hired John Perry. This is the perfect example. They hired John Perry to call down and say, challenge this or don't. This is what I see. I'm the expert. I don't think it's a problem for Sean McDermott to be a great leader, to be a great coach, to be a leader of men, to be respected, and all of the strengths that he has, and for him to admit, I'm not the best at situational moments. So we hired that guy to effectively call down and be in our ears in this moment. This is what I'm feeling. This is what you should look for. This is how you should defend it, how you should play it. Have you ever heard of, thought of? What are your thoughts on that? And this is literally just me brainstorming.
I love it. I love the conversation, and I hadn't thought about that. But you're right.
Mhm.
Like Peterson's been in a lot of big games. I mean, obviously has a perspective on the passing game that I'd probably say few do in the NFL. Right? It's not working there, and maybe he's not built to be an NFL head coach. And it went well
Right.
for that 1 year in Philadelphia, and they had the people in place, and that's fine. The thing that I think goes against Sean more than anything is in those big moments, you have to fully trust the people that are the decision makers to be the decision makers. And I think with two young coordinators, how much time is he spending away from the 30-foot view decisions? And is he in the weeds with the game, the play to play decisions? And all right, Joe Brady in the offense, punt two drives in a row. How much is he involved in all of that? Is
Right.
he working through that with Joe Brady in game? How much is he talking to Josh Allen? It's never something that they're going to let us fully in. Maybe
Mm-mm.
having somebody else to handle a part of that. But then you get into the kind of the conversation that I think would be interesting is the more of those you add to the pile, right? The guy that is the John Perry, they have a quality control coach, they have
Yep.
a spotter, they have this, they have that, offensive assistant. How many do you need? At one point, isn't it just you can do it or you can't? And the other piece of this too, the pushback I have on the crowd that says, all right, I'm ready for the next iteration. Get rid of McDermott. I want something else. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's three guys in this league right now that I will say definitively I would take as a head coach over Sean McDermott. Andy Reid,
Yes.
Sean McVay.
Yes.
Who was the other one?
Jim Harbaugh. Not John, Jim. I would take Jim Harbaugh.
Okay.
That's just me. But you're 100% right.
For me, definitively, where no bones about it, I'm answering right now. Those are the two. I'm just going to say, for argument's sake.
Yeah.
I like Jim, throwing him into the mix there. But a lot of people will come back with Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan is literally the offensive clone of Sean McDermott with 2 Super Bowl appearances. He really is.
You're not wrong.
In big games,
You're not wrong.
It's the same kind of stuff. I've like fumbled through like 49ers Reddit and all of the message boards and that same sect of the fan base that there is in Bills Mafia with the Sean McDermott Fire Brigade. They're there with Shanahan in San Francisco. So I just think that unless you have the number one can't miss, like, Ben Johnson from Detroit, he might be it. He might be the next guy, right?
He might not be, but he might not be.
He might not be too.
Right.
But I will say the way that he's dialing it up in Detroit with that group, with Jared Goff, I like a lot of things about him. And the fact that he's being a little bit picky about the job that he gets, maybe the quarterback he gets, I like that too, because I don't like these guys. Dable, love Dable. Personally, Buffalo guy, loved every interaction I've had with him. I've had, beers with him at the owners' meetings. You can't always pick your job. I get that. But him and Shane going to New York with Daniel Jones in place and not a plan to get out of that, to me is like you're setting yourself up to fail. And I like the fact that Ben Johnson is like, yeah, I'm not in on, was it the Commander's job for what they didn't have Jaden Daniels yet. It was too much uncertainty. I'm good. I'm going to keep my star rising in Detroit. I know we got all these guys. I'm good. I like that. And this would be a very, very good job for a prospective head coach with Josh Allen in place. Yep. But I'm just saying, if I'm Terry Pegula, I'm not pulling that trigger unless I'm definitive that the guy I'm bringing in here is better, because for all of his warts and all of his faults, this has been a pretty good run of Bills football over the last 7.5 seasons that I think if you go back and poll every Bills fan in 2016 and say, here's a crystal ball, I'm going to give you this over the next 7.5 years.
Coming out of the drought,
you're not going to get to a Super Bowl. Are they all taking it? Just to have a chance. Just to have a chance every year and to have Josh Allen and all of this stuff. It's not perfect, man. Like, there's no perfect answer. And and I get the frustrations. Listen, my phone is littered with Sean McDermott hate to the highest order from family members, friends, after games, a lot of colorful language. It's a whole deal. So I get it. I get what Bills fans are going through. I just don't know that the answer is necessarily out there right now.
That's not relegated to just you, my friend. They're all in my DMs as well. How long with this guy? What is it going to do? He's definitely getting fired after this. Yesterday, he's getting fired after this game, after the Hail Mary. I was like, not if they win. Like, what are you talking about? They're not firing Sean McDermott before the stadium opens. Like, it's just not going to happen. Matt, it's been great having you on the show. Carl Tomlin with the super chat says, on 10/22/18, the Cowboys traded for Amari Cooper, who was then Dak's #1 target with 53 catches for 725 yards, 6 touchdowns in 9 games. Great pickup by Bean. I don't think anybody is arguing that. I'm excited. I wanted to follow up and ask, but we'll save it for another time. Just how you
go ahead. You got me all juiced up now. Go ahead.
No, that's the problem with you and me specifically, is even when the camera's not on, I could talk to you for hours. We ham it up a lot. This will be the last question, but real quick, tell everybody where they can find you. Not that everybody doesn't already know, but just in case, if they don't know where to find you, tell them where to find your work and how to connect with you.
Yeah, host of the Shout podcast, like Joe mentioned. Subscribe on YouTube, all the platforms, audio and video. And the best place to find everything is at Matt Parrino over on X and Threads. Actually, I've been trying to get more on Threads.
Very good. So the last question was an Amari Cooper question. How do you see, and you may have answered it, but specifically strategy-wise, strategery, how do you see him fitting into this offense? What they're going to, is it going to be Diggs-esque? I've seen that today on Twitter as well. Like, he might be better than Diggs. I'm like, slow down. Like, let's not, right? So, but how do you see him fitting into this offense and how it might benefit others? And you did mention it real quick, and I'll say it just again, MVS has been released by this football team, so he's no longer on this team. So yeah, how do you see him fitting into this offense? And then I'll let you go.
I'm not 100% closing the door on MVS. Like, I know that there's been some, all right, easy addition to the Chiefs because he's been there and they just need a guy because Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown and all that kind of stuff. So that makes sense. Ben Solak with the tweet of the day. Aaron Rodgers has a chance to do the funniest thing ever after bringing in Lazard and Devontae Adams to go get
Yes, he does.
MVS and add that back to the mix.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't rule out him landing back with the Bills practice squad. Only because him and Josh Allen got super tight, and it might be like, I mean, the selling point on MVS at this point in his career is call me in the playoffs. Like, that's when he makes these big plays. So, kind of a little bit of insurance. We'll see how that develops. But in terms of what Cooper means for everybody else, I think it allows all of them to fit into the role that they're at in their career. Like, as high as I am on Khalil Shakir, I don't think he is a bona fide number one wide receiver. I just don't think that the versatility to his game, or at least in the Bills offense, is what he's ever going to be. But he could be really like one of the elite twos in the league with what he gives you on week-to-week basis. It allows Samuel to like scale back to that third, fourth wide receiver, which is where he's thrived in Washington and Carolina. And that's the other thing that I kind of missed in Carolina. They had DJ Moore there when he was there, and that's really easy when you can have defenses focusing on him and you can kind of do a lot of the stuff somewhere else. So now you have that in Cooper. I think that's better for Samuel. And then Coleman,
he had it in Washington with McLaurin as well. McLaurin,
100%.
Scary Terry taking everything, and then he's living his best life under like doing other things. Yeah,
100%. And so if you got those two guys in those spots, you have Amari, on the boundary doing some different things. And I think I got to look up his numbers. I think he does do a little slot stuff. Or here's a idea that I didn't even mention on my podcast today, Joe, that I'll roll
exclusive
out on.
We got the exclusive
Overreaction. What did Steve Smith say last week about Keon Coleman? He should be playing in the slot. So maybe the Bills, even though sometimes they're really determined to take their draft take and have it play out over many seasons, maybe they can pivot off of that, because everybody you talk to with Keon Coleman coming out said he's a slot, he's a big slot, he's a physical slot. Maybe there's a way to introduce him into that thing and then maybe peel back a little bit on Shakir, especially while he's injured, and see how that plays out. Now you can put Cooper out there, you can put Samuel out there, Coleman and Shakir can kind of platoon in the middle. Shakir can kind of move around too. Samuel can be that gadget guy when you need him to be. There's more options. And I don't think Joe Brady should shy away from trying it. You don't have to keep Coleman an X because you said he was an X when you drafted him.
100%. 100%. That was a fantastic answer, and it's got me excited. Matt Parrino, love having you on the program. Appreciate you. As tired as you are, the energy that you've got. So thank you so much for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been tuned into On the Beat on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by Believe. So good to have you guys join us. Thanks again to Matt Parrino, Buffalo Shout Podcast, Syracuse.com. Follow him on Twitter at Matt Parrino. He is one of the best guys on the beat. Love you, dude. But for me, for John, for Jerry, for everybody here at Overreaction, go Bills.